You know, my predecessor, Abe Foxman, he would talk about the job of being the CEO or national director of ADL as having some perks. Tonight is one of those nights. I mean, as a lifelong, passionate Zionist, I could not be more proud, literally, than to be recognized by the President of Israel. But as the husband of an Iranian human rights activist and the father of 3 beautiful Iranian-American children, I could not be more proud to stand here tonight and to introduce our next speaker. With humility and privilege, I am delighted to share with the stage tonight with a man who, on the surface, might not seem an obvious choice for a program celebrating Israel's 75 years. Yet he is an individual of remarkable vision who repeatedly has displayed the kind of courage that is so rarely seen on the world stage. His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince of Iran, truly is a historic figure. He is the eldest son of the former Shah of Iran, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who left Iran in 1979 and whose country has suffered ever since, subject to the brutality and oppression of the Islamic regime. Iran today is ruled by a tyrannical government whose revolutionary creed compels them not only to crush the will of their own people, but to export their maximalist, violent brand of political Islam across the region, throughout the Middle East, to Europe and beyond. It is an extremist regime with an ideology as dangerous as Al-Qaeda because it is unwilling to reconcile with open societies. It is a kleptocracy that cannot abide by the rule of law, and it is an Islamist dictatorship that refuses to acknowledge the legitimacy of a Jewish democracy. It is an armed militia that is focused not on feeding its own people, but on subjugating its citizens and spreading terror across the region. Indeed, Iran is the leading state sponsor of terror around the world and a country whose #1 export is anti-Semitism. And so, for all these reasons, we here tonight need to appreciate the significance of the Crown Prince. For decades, living in exile here in the United States, the Crown Prince has been one of the most prominent and often lonely public voices calling attention to the excesses of the Islamic Republic. Whereas some here inside the Beltway have engaged in an endless, pointless debate about the merits of reformers or hardliners, the Crown Prince has had the clarity and long understood that this is a false choice. These are 2 sides of the same coin. And what the people of Iran need is an alternative path that aligns with the rest of the world, that Iran should be a free, secular democracy. My friends, it is hard to describe the danger that he has lived with for decades because of this vision, and because he is a symbol of everything that the regime detests, a connection to a prosperous, secular past that now, once again, seems possible. It is the hope of this attainable future that sustains the girls, the women, and the millions of ordinary people risking their lives every day in protests across Iran, a pro-democracy movement that needs our help because it remains vibrant and vital, even if the Western press failed to give it the coverage that it deserves. And unfortunately, our political leaders lack the courage to embrace them. Today, it is indisputable that the regime has lost the plot. Their greatest weapons, intimidation and fear, have been exhausted. Women are no longer afraid to drop their hijabs. Students are no longer afraid to walk out on classes. Businesses are no longer afraid to strike. The days are numbered for the Islamic Republic. It is not a matter of if, but when. And so, just 2 weeks ago, Mr. Pehlevi did something audacious, courageous, and historic. He traveled to the Jewish state. He extended his hand in peace and solidarity and met with a range of Israeli leaders and public figures. He attended a Holocaust Memorial Day ceremony at Yad Vashem. He prayed at the Kotel. He visited and paid respects at the Baha'i Gardens in Haifa. He paid a condolence call to the D family following the terrorist murder of Mother Lucy and sisters Maya and Rina of blessed memory. He spoke of renewing ties between Iran and Israel and, quote, working toward the peaceful and prosperous future that the people of our region deserve. Taken together, there's nothing that the regime fears more. A future where girls don't wear the hijabs, a future where every vote counts, a future where all religions in Iran coexist in harmony, a future where the country no longer is at war with its Jewish neighbor. This is a future that terrifies the regime because it is one where the Islamic Republic has lost its raison d'etre. And my friends, the Crown Prince is that future, not as a king, but as a catalyst for a free, democratic, and secular Iran, one at peace with its own people, one at peace with Israel, and one at peace with the world. So please, join me in welcoming to the stage tonight His Royal Highness Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi.
Jonathan, thank you so much for your strong and very moving introduction. I'm truly touched. And before I begin, happy 75th birthday to the people of Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is a pleasure to be with you tonight to pay tribute to 110 years of the Anti-Defamation League's tireless work to combat bigotry. Your commitment to the fight against hatred, particularly against those of the Jewish faith, is honorable, and I thank and congratulate you for these efforts. I know that this audience is all too familiar with the scourge of anti-Semitism, the importance of fighting against it, and the necessity of educating about it. So I am here this evening to offer my thoughts on the cascading effects that anti-Semitism can lead to and the toll they can take. As a student of the practitioners of peace, from Gene Sharp to Dr. King to Gandhi, I have long respected the ADL's work. I believe its impact goes beyond a singular focus on anti-Semitism. Instead, your work helps counter all forms of discrimination. Because hate is hate, and wherever the passive normalization of hatred of one group is allowed, it makes a society that much more vulnerable to such poison being directed at others. I saw this firsthand in my country, Iran. The leaders of the 1979 Islamic Revolution and the founders of the current regime that has brought such horror upon my country were driven by a blind animus towards the Jewish people. As they took power, our leading statesmen were accused of being Zionist spies. Our businessmen and philanthropists like Habib El-Ghanian were executed. Indeed, the entire government was accused of being a Jewish conspiracy. This anti-Semitic fear-mongering was pervasive, but the hatred and conspiracies did not stop with the Jewish people. When the revolutionaries' anti-Semitic propaganda campaign became so pervasive, such as to appear normal, the hate-mongers and propaganda peddlers fixed their sights on their next targets. Iranian women quickly became the foremost target of the revolutionaries and their new government. They were publicly beaten, harassed, and segregated from the early days of the revolution. That was only the beginning. For 4 decades, they have systematically disenfranchised, most notably being legally considered to be worth half of a man. The Islamic Republic's campaign of bigotry also includes members of the Baha'i faith who are punished for their religious beliefs, face government-mandated discrimination in schools and workplaces, and experience property confiscation and desecration of their cemeteries. Sunni Muslims were denied the right to worship in their own mosques. Christians were forced into secretive house churches. The vast majority of Iranian Shia Muslims, those who did not subscribe to Khomeini's perverse interpretation of our faith, were persecuted. Those who spoke up, like Ayatollah Montazeri, were silenced or killed. The persecution even took aim at our ancient culture and traditions. The new regime attempted to ban the celebration of Nowruz, our national holiday. It came after those who celebrated Iran's pre-Islamic identity. 44 years on, the list of victims of what began as an anti-Semitic conspiracy continues to grow. You're no doubt familiar with a famous quote from German pastor Martin Niemöller. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Well, after the Islamic Revolution in Iran and in many other places, it is indeed the case that first they come for the Jews and then they come for the others. So that is why we must speak out. That is why I am here this evening, and that is why I went to Israel. I went to stand up against the Islamic Republic's anti-Semitism and to stand in solidarity with victims of the Holocaust in the face of the regime's Holocaust denial. I went to mourn with the victims of the regime-sponsored terrorism. But I also went to Israel to stand up for my people, so that there will be no further victims of hate and bigotry. For when we allow the baseless hatred of one group to go unchecked, it inevitably leads to more. That is what happened in my country. My trip to Israel was not merely to stand on principle. I went with a new vision for our region. A vision that is not bogged down in the forced ideological divisions of recent decades, but instead based on the ancient ways of our lands and connections between our people. The ties between the Iranian and Jewish people are millennia old and rooted in the traditions of Queen Esther and King Cyrus. It was in Cyrus's spirit that I went to Israel. Because it is that spirit of tolerance, friendship, and cooperation that is truly representative of the Iranian nation, not the anti-Semitist terrorism and deprivation that the current regime occupying my country represents. But to see this tradition, we do not need to refer all the way back to biblical times. This was how we lived as a nation just 4 decades ago. Iranian Muslims, Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, Baha'is, and even people of no faith lived together as citizens endowed with equal rights. That led our country to extend that same spirit, the spirit of Cyrus, to our regional and international relationships. It was the Iranian diplomat Abdul Hossein Sardari who refused to flee occupied Paris and personally issued Iranian passports to over 2,000 Jews, allowing them safe passage to Iran and saving them from Hitler's concentration camps. He was our Schindler. Today, it is the people of the Middle East, including religious minorities, who are fleeing the region and seeking refuge in Europe as a result of discrimination, oppression, and conflicts. It is remarkable to consider that just several decades ago, it was the people of Europe, including members of its Jewish communities, who sought refuge in Iran, fleeing the Holocaust and war. That spirit continued with Iran's cooperation with Israel, to our partnership with Arab nations in the Persian Gulf and across the Middle East. Today, the Abraham Accords remind us that it is still possible, but I believe that such peace will only be sustainable and will only reach its maximum potential for the betterment of the lives of all the people of our region when a secular, democratic Iran joins its ranks. In a future secular and democratic Iran, the rule of law, based not only on the International Declaration of Human Rights, but on Cyrus the Great's first ever declaration, will establish and guarantee freedom of religion as a fundamental right, so that Iran can return to its roots as a nation where people of different faiths live and worship freely alongside each other. In such an Iran, this will extend our relation with all of our neighbors based on the principle of mutual respect and peaceful coexistence. That is the Iran I envision. That is the Iran my compatriots are fighting for. My friends, just as Cyrus helped free the Jewish people from Babylon and aided them in rebuilding the temple, today my people are under captivity and in need of solidarity and support. There is a temple that needs to be rebuilt. Iran is our temple. Stand with us. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.